As the leaders tried to stem the tide, the boats still came. 78 people were spotted on board this one. Dozens more were later seen being brought into Dover harbour from another small boat.
Mr. President, Emmanuel, it's a pleasure to have you with us. We all agree the situation in the Channel cannot go on as it is. So we're bringing new tactics into play.
The biggest new tactic is a returns policy. Britain would send back to France, it's believed, up to 50 migrants a week who'd arrived on small boats. In return, it would accept an equal number of asylum seekers who were currently based in France, but eligible through family connections to claim asylum in Britain.
I'm pleased to announce our agreement today on a groundbreaking returns pilot. For the very first time, migrants arriving via small boat will be detained and returned to France in short order. In exchange for every return, a different individual will be allowed to come here via a safe route, controlled and legal, subject to strict security checks, and only open to those who have not tried to enter the UK illegally.
What we want to do is precisely to have this deterrence effect vis-à-vis all these smugglers and all the traffickers in order to send a message that we are efficient and they have no more interest to try to play with the rules.
But would up to 50 returns a week act as a deterrent? Based on current average arrival figures, that would amount to 1 in 17 of those who arrive on small boats facing being returned to France.
Now, if it continues to be quite a small percentage of people who are returned to France through this agreement, then I think it's quite likely that people will just see that as one more risk at the end of what's actually already been a very risky journey. Asylum seekers coming to the UK, they take risks with their life. They've often been on an even more dangerous journey, for example, across the Mediterranean before they come to Europe and to the UK.
France is approaching this very gingerly, aware that some EU countries suspect President Macron wants to hand his new arrivals from Britain straight over to them.
They are very concerned because of the people who are being sent back from the UK to France. Many of them will have arrived in one of these Mediterranean countries first. And under EU rules, that could mean that France is able to send them back to that country where they first entered the EU, Italy, Greece, Spain. And these countries honestly have an interest in seeing people move on from Europe to the UK, where they're no longer the problem of any European country. So it's a major political concern for them and a concern at the EU level.
I don't think you could have got a better illustration of what's happening in the Channel every single time there's a calm day than what we saw this morning.
Exploiting this moment, Nigel Farage took GB News and some newspaper journalists out into the Channel. He said deportations were bound to be blocked by legal challenges.
And then another boat, great big boat, just come to pick up the empty.
It is of some significance, I think, that whilst we have been working hard to get the returns agreement, others have been simply taking pictures of the problem. And that is where the politics is. It's this, we have to show that pragmatic politics is the way to deliver the results which matter for both of our peoples.
One must never cede to the temptation of populism, which is a denial of science or travesty of the facts. That's what sets us apart from the rest.
It's an arrangement France had previously rejected when the Tories in government had pursued it. Keir Starmer said it was no silver bullet, but a triumph for his style of quiet diplomacy. It was very interesting how those two leaders build this, where you had President Macron, long list of all the other achievements as he saw it of this summit, a whole range of issues, including defence issues. He put this one very much at the bottom, like an afterthought. Keir Starmer did a sort of state visit-style drum roll before he came to the very top of his statement, this returns policy. He clearly thinks it is something to talk about, something that could make a difference, and he's using that phrase groundbreaking all the time. Again, a change in tone with Emmanuel Macron, who talked about how there had been an agreement in principle that would then be subject to legal checks, not only in his own country, but in the European Union as well. And Emmanuel Macron has the European Union kind of breathing down his neck a bit on this one, not just, as we said there, those countries who are worried he's going to deposit the people who come from Britain. in their jurisdictions, but also the EU itself, the European Commission, the keepers of the flame of the European Union laws. They're a bit worried that basically Britain might be trying to get, if this returns policy were to expand, some kind of backdoor deal, which it wasn't ready to sign up to when it did the Brexit deal. So that's who's breathing down Emmanuel Macron's neck. Nigel Farage, of course, is breathing down Keir Starmer's neck. And you heard him there talking about the importance of pragmatism. He also allowed himself, maybe under the impact of the Macron philosophe sort of aura, to talk about how social democracy must prevail. We heard a slightly different Keir Starmer at one point in that press conference when he was asked how centrists like those two leaders feel about the populists outside. I should tell you there are some interesting, though the government deny it, echoes of the Rwanda policy that the last government was pursuing here. If an asylum seeker is sent over to France, they may not apply to come back to Britain. They will have been deemed unable to do that. There was great interest amongst people who were pursuing the Rwanda policy of going for people who, as they come off the boat, as it were. I mean, some people even spoke about trying to get them straight to the airport and off to Rwanda. Well, the government's not talking about that, but it is talking about prioritising people who have just arrived for this kind of processing to try and get the message across. On the Rwanda parallel, though, they're saying this is about sending people to France. And although there almost certainly will be legal challenges if it gets off the ground, they think there would be far more legal challenges under a Rwanda scheme, and they minimise that with this approach.
Gary, thanks very much. Well, fundamental to this deal is the attempt to stop the pull factors drawing so many migrants to Britain. Our communities editor, Darshna Soni, has talked to some migrants who arrived in the UK by boat to find out what drew them here and what they made of today's announcement.
Songs of renewal and rebirth. Mihare and his new friends are all seeking a new beginning in England, risking their lives to get here.
Very dangerous, you know. I'm scared in the sea.
That's you making the video.
Sure, man.
There's a lot of people on the boat.
Yes, a lot of people. 75, maybe 70.
Aaron showed me videos he took of his crossing from Calais, dangerously overcrowded, among them women and 2 children. The 24-year-old is from Eritrea, where he says he faced military conscription, forced labour and physical abuse under its repressive regime.
My country is unsafe.
It took him 4 years to reach England.
From Eritrea to Sudan, from Sudan to South Sudan, from South Sudan to Belarus, Belarus to Poland, Poland to German, German to Belgium, after that France, after France I come here.
And why did you want to come to England?
I feel safe, and also I want to live my dream. England is my dream.
This was the moment he realised he'd finally made it. But will the policy announced today have deterred them from making the crossing? Brooke was a scientist in Ethiopia and admits he had a good job. But that's before, he says, he came to the attention of the government. He's from the ethnic Amhara group who've been targeted with violence and arbitrary arrests.
My hand was also damaged. My legs were also damaged. They will kick me by electric cable, okay? I was in trouble in my country, in prison, in black prison, around, into the ground, okay? For about 2 weeks.
He paid thousands of pounds to a smuggler to get from Dunkirk to Dover.
Well, we were just scared because there were a wave, a high wave, and normally it takes, in normal condition, 4 hours, 3 hours, but we are just taking almost 7 hours.
When you were trying to get to England on that boat, if you knew that the government was going to send some people back to France, would that have stopped you getting on that boat?
I left my country to save my life, okay? The UK government protect me, my life from danger, okay?
There are some people in England who feel that there are too many people like yourself trying to get asylum here and that we can't take everybody. What do you say to them?
They don't understand what's going on there. But, you know, a lot of people, the government just kill with drone a lot of Amhara society, okay?
The government also announced that the jobs many men have been promised here will no longer exist.
Are you only coming here for economic reasons?
No, I did not come here for economic reason. I came here for my protection. Yeah, for my protection, not for the economic reason.
France has often criticised what it calls the pull of Britain for many young men, suggesting their hostile environment is more of a deterrent.
Some people in England say, why don't you stay in France? Why do you have to come to England?
I was at France, and I was a beggar, okay? I begged somebody to eat, okay, for food.
England government is, you know, is a very good government because they help people.
The government hopes its new tune will convey a very different message, but with no specific numbers or details, will it really be enough to stop the flow of boats?
Well, here with me now is Mike Tapp, who's the Labour MP for Dover and Deal in Kent. Mike Tapp, 220 migrants arrived in Dover, your constituency, today. Do you really think that sending back 50 a week would deter anyone from coming?
Well, this is one policy in a raft of policies. There isn't one change we make that will stop the boats from crossing. So we've had record deportations since we've come into government. We've sped up processing by 50%. Well, actually, we have seen that number before in 2022 under the Conservatives. We've set up the Border Security Command. In Parliament now, there's counter-terror powers coming into play, which will help the National Crime Agency, the Border Security Command. We've formed those international relationships. The bit that was missing was that deterrent. Of course, deportations does that. But what I said earlier to someone was, look, if you're running a business, which is what the smuggling gangs are doing, say you're running a car business and one in every 15 vehicles you sell is dodgy, your business model starts to break down, and that's what this is doing. And we've got to remember this is the pilot, right. This is the beginning. It could get much bigger.
And it is in very early stages, isn't it? Because there's a real risk that it falls foul of the lawyers or even the rest of the EU. It's not a done deal, really, is it?
Well, it remains to be seen, doesn't it? And look, Keir seems confident that this is going to get off the ground, and he wouldn't say that if he wasn't confident.
But you accept there's an element of doubt in all of this today?
Not that I've seen. We've also seen, that diplomatic influence take hold. The French are already changing their laws around tackling the boats in shallow water. That's another part of the hard work that's going to make a difference here. There's lots of different policy areas that are going to help bring those numbers down.
But the lawyers could strike it out unless, for example, you declare it unlawful for a migrant to claim asylum in the UK if they've travelled through a safe third country like France in the first place. That was what the Tories were proposing. Why not do that?
Well, the Conservatives were trying to get this policy off the ground. They went begging to the French and were rejected at the first hurdle. We've got them at the table. We've come to an agreement. And of course, it's a pilot, but hopefully it will grow. And of course, there's always legal challenges. But look, what I say generally on that is we're legislators, and it's about forcing things through and making it work. And I'm very confident we'll be able to do that with this.
Right. I mean, it's interesting. You admit yourself it's a Tory policy. Is that an
admission? It's not a Tory policy. The Conservatives have no chance of getting this through.
OK, but, they came up with the policy and you've adopted it and made it happen.
There's no monopoly on ideas, is there? And like I said, there are many different policy approaches to this. This is one of them, and I think it will be really good.
On this, at least, is an admission that the Conservatives were right on this point about immigration.
Well, the Conservatives decided to go for Rwanda, which cost the taxpayers hundreds of millions of pounds, and they deported 4. And what we're doing is getting in place a policy that's credible and it will actually make a difference.
But they say if you kept the Rwanda policy, it would have been a much bigger deterrent.
Yeah, look, the Rwanda policy was a one-way ticket to a nation with questionable human rights. This is nothing like that, apart from the fact that it returns people and it will act as a deterrent without any shadow of a doubt.
Emmanuel Macron said today in that press conference with the Prime Minister that Brexit made illegal migration worse for the UK, that taking back control was a lie. Do you agree with him?
Well, look, we don't want to drag Brexit back up, but there is some truth to the fact that only 300 boats crossed in 2018. We came out the Dublin Agreement and it shot up to over 150,000. We can't ignore that fact. But this is about moving forward. So it's getting agreements in place to deter. It's deporting record numbers. It's taking out illegal employers, which creates that pull factor. There's lots we're doing to bring this down. I'm confident it will have an effect.
You're a Remainer yourself. Is it not now time to start making the argument? You could do these deals much easier if you were part of the EU.
I have to be completely honest with you. I may have voted Remain because I've told you that before the interview, but it doesn't make me a Remainer. That's well and truly in the past. It's about moving forward. It's about getting, well, as we've seen with the EU deal, it's about getting those closer relationships up and running, which is what we're seeing from this government already.
Mike Tapp, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Chris Philp, do you support this one in, one out policy?
Good evening, Cathy. Well, I'm afraid this is another sham from Keir Starmer, just like his absurd claim to be smashing the gangs, because this will only cover 50 illegal immigrants per month. That's about 2,600 a year, which represents only 1 in 17 of those illegally crossing the channel. The other 16 out of 17 will get to stay. So if 94% of illegal immigrants are allowed to stay in the UK, this won't be a deterrent at all, and the problem will simply continue.
But I'm assuming you support the policy, limited as it may be, because it's your policy, isn't it?
Well, the policy I support is to remove 100% of people who arrive illegally across the channel. Of course, we had that. It was the Rwanda deterrent that was ready to start at the end of July. That would have entailed all of the illegal immigrants being removed, but Keir Starmer very foolishly cancelled that just a few days before it was due to start.
Well, except
and as a consequence, numbers have surged. They've gone up. The illegal immigration across the channel has gone up by 40% since Starmer cancelled that. And in fact, this year, 2025, has been the worst year so far in history for illegal migrants crossing the channel.
Okay,
Keir Starmer must be regretting his decision.
I'll come on to reasons for that in just a second. But ditching the Rwanda deal is actually one of the reasons that Keir Starmer got this deal with Emmanuel Macron over the line, because you'd sabotaged relations with the EU, hadn't you?
Well, I don't think the Rwanda deal had anything to do with the EU one way or another. In fact, it would have probably helped them, because it would have meant that illegal immigrants would be deterred from coming to France to attempt the crossing in the first place if they knew they'd wind up in Rwanda. So actually, the Rwanda deal would, if anything, have helped France. So I don't accept that argument at all.
French officials have said that ditching the Rwanda deal was a precursor to agreeing this deal. But, you know, Emmanuel Macron has made quite plain today, publicly, that Brexit made illegal migration worse for the UK. So you were talking about numbers going up. That was partly, in his view, because of Brexit. So taking back control was a lie.
Well, I don't accept President Macron's analysis. You see even more migrants cross the Mediterranean than cross the English Channel and then circulate inside the European Union. Many of them actually end up in Germany, and Germany obviously is a member of the European Union. It's not doing Germany very much good. Look, the Rwanda returns deterrent, where every illegal immigrant would have ended up in Rwanda, would have very rapidly, within a few months, stopped the illegal migration. It's common sense that if you're an illegal immigrant in Europe and you cross the channel but then wind up in Rwanda, you're not going to bother attempting it. Australia did something similar about 12 or 13 years ago, and within a matter of months, they completely stopped the illegal migration by boat they were experiencing. And in fact, they had even higher numbers than we currently do. So that would have worked. It worked in Australia. Keir Starmer cancelled it, and the numbers have surged. And his first plan, his first gimmick was, we're going to smash the gangs. Right. That didn't work, and this is simply the latest gimmick. There is no way that letting 94% of illegal immigrants stay here is going to be any deterrent at all. It's completely unrealistic.
You've made that point, but, you know, you talk tough, but actually your leader is being urged by some of your colleagues to withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights to give the UK more control over immigration. She's just doing a policy review on that. And in the meantime, the former party chairman, Jake Berry, defects to reform. Are you content to lose some of your supporters to reform because you're just dithering on these kind of issues?
Well, I wouldn't say we're dithering. I think what we're doing is being thoughtful. So we've already said we should repeal the Human Rights Act in relation to immigration matters. We forced that to a vote in Parliament just a few weeks ago, but Labour voted against it. On the ECHR, we're doing a short review. Lord Wolfson, a very eminent KC barrister, is doing that, and it'll report by party conference in early October.
Wasn't enough for Jake Berry.
Well, look, I'm sorry to hear that. Look, I'm sorry to hear that, but when it comes to something like leaving the ECHR, it is important to be thoughtful and not shoot from the hip like Reform do. We're going to do this properly. We're going to make sure it works. We're going to be thoughtful. And that is the difference between us and Reform. They shoot from the hip and just say the first thing that comes into their mind. We are being careful and thoughtful in the way that we're approaching this, and that's what the public would expect.
Chris Philp, thanks very much.
Thank you.